Hello student, welcome all of you in our third lecture. This is for a B.Sc.FY student, semester first, and paper is Differential Calculus first paper. So student, in previous lecture we have discussed what is meant by function. Now after function there is a concept of what is meant by limit, what is meant by continuity, and what is meant by derivability. So if we study what is meant by derivation or what is meant by derivability, then the concept of limit and continuity comes to study. Now we are going to discuss what is meant by derivative. What is meant by derivative? So we consider one function f of x. F of x is any function, and we define this function on interval AB. On interval AB. So f of x is the any function, and we defined it on the interval AB, and C with the any number. C with the any number belong to this interval AB. So for this C, we get the value of function is f of C. We get the value of function f of C. So we take C plus H. That means small increment is there, other member of that interval which lies to the right or left of the C. Take this C plus H. Either is it left or right. That is C plus H is greater or less than C. No doubt. According as H is positive or negative. So either H is positive, then C plus H is greater than C, and if H is negative, then C plus H is less than C. Like this. Suppose I discuss here. I discuss it here. This is a graph, and this suppose this is a function. This is a function we defined on the interval a to b. We defined on the interval a to b, and suppose C is there. C is there. So we get this point here, this point, and for this b here this point. So at the A we discuss this point is AF of A. Is it right? AF of A. For this C it is C and F of C, and for this point it is B and F of B. So here we take H element C plus H. Now C plus H is greater than C if it is the right side of H. So H is positive, and if H is negative, then C plus H. That means if H is negative, so it becomes the C minus H, and C minus H is less than C. That means the left side of C and right side of C. Now I take here particularly to the right side. That means there is no questions of plus sign between them. So I take here it is on right side. So see here. So C plus H, according as H is positive or negative, the value of the function corresponding to it. And if we take the C plus H of elements of the domain, then its corresponding value is f of C plus H. So see here in the graph. See here in the graph. After H, this point becomes C plus H. this point, after h distance, this point from origin is c plus h, and value at the c plus h is f of c plus h. So this point I take here, this point c plus h, and corresponding value f of c plus h. C plus h and corresponding value f of c plus h. See, be carefully. So here h is the change in the independent variable x, and we take f of c plus h minus f of x. F of c plus h minus f of c. So difference between these indicate that corresponding change in the dependent variable f of c, and the expression. So see here, I take this graph and this point, this graph to here, especially here I take here this. Suppose this point is c f of c, and this point is c plus h f of c plus h. Now if we take the change in them, that means f of c plus h minus f of c plus h minus f of c. See here, if we take the change in these values, so we get f of c plus h minus f of c divided by c plus h minus c, and we observe that when c get cancelled, we get this ratio. So this is the ratio of these two changes is a function of h, and is not defined for the h is equal to 0. So c being a fixed number. So in this ratio, I can also represent in another way, that is, suppose f is the function from the set A to B, and in A there are some element A, some element, then C plus H, and last is B, and their corresponding values. So corresponding value of A is f of A, associate to this. Corresponding of C is f of C, corresponding C plus H is f of C plus H, and B is f of B, isn't it? So how change is there in the codomain when we change the value in domain? We discussed this ratio. So taking difference between these, f of C plus H minus f of C corresponding to difference in C plus H minus C, and we get this difference f of C plus H minus f of C divided by H. So this H must not be equal to 0, because if H is 0, then the term is not defined term or meaningless. So there is one condition we observe, that whatever the difference between them or whatever the ratio, there is a limit. H tends to 0. That means we can take this H near and near to 0 but not equal to 0, and thus we use here limit H tends to 0. And this is nothing but definition of derivative. What is this? This is definition of derivative. Now we define the definition. That is the definition. So f of x is said to be, derivable at x is equal to c if this limit is exist, that is limit h tends to 0, and f of c plus h minus f of c divided by h. So this is a definition of derivative. And if this limit is exist, then limit is called derivative. This limit is called derivative, or differential coefficient of the function f of x, or differential coefficient. Differential coefficient of f of x for x is equal to c. So student, this is the definition of a derivative. So in next lecture we discuss some example on it. You revise this definition, what is meant by a derivative, what is meant by derivable function. In next lecture we discuss some problems. Thank you very much.